Most people think the deadliest battles in American history were fought against outsiders. They weren't. The Apache and Comanche waged a war so long, so personal, and so brutal, it reshaped the entire Southwest. But what actually triggered it? Why didn't it end for over a century? The late 1500s brought the Apache their greatest prize, control of the southern Great Plains. Buffalo herds stretched endlessly across grasslands that seemed made for farming. Rich soil, perfect hunting. The Apache had struck gold, except their gold had 4 legs and grazed peacefully under endless skies. Their secret weapon wasn't fancy war tactics or superior numbers, it was something much simpler. They figured out how to do 2 things at once. While other tribes either farmed or hunted, the Apache mastered both. They were basically the first people to discover multitasking, centuries before anyone invented that word. Villages grew strong because food was never scarce. Children learned to plant corn in spring and chase buffalo in summer. Warriors stayed well-fed and ready for battle year-round. The Apache had cracked the code of plains survival through pure common sense. Success made enemies fast. Apache war parties didn't just defend their territory, they expanded it through calculated raids on Spanish settlements. Taos and Santa Fe learned to fear Apache attacks. These weren't random strikes either. The Apache studied their targets, learned Spanish weaknesses, and hit exactly where it hurt most. Spanish colonists called them fierce and unpredictable enemies. That's colonial speak for, we have no idea how to stop these guys from taking our stuff. The Apache earned this reputation through skill, not luck. They turned raiding into an art form that brought back horses, weapons, and captives with ruthless efficiency. The really clever part came next. The Apache learned horsemanship by stealing Spanish horses. By the 1950s, they'd become expert riders. Nothing says thanks for the riding lessons, like taking your teacher's horse and becoming better at it than they are. The Apache controlled the best hunting grounds, the most fertile farming areas, and the strategic trade routes connecting different regions. They'd built an empire that stretched across the heart of North America. Their combination of farming and hunting had created unprecedented prosperity. But empires built on raiding create enemies. Every successful Apache attack made more people want revenge. One group in particular was watching from the margins, learning from Apache success, and planning their own rise to power. The Comanche began as complete failures. Other tribes, including the Apache, had pushed them onto the worst land available, dry soil that wouldn't grow crops, hunting grounds picked clean by everyone else. If the Plains had a Worst Neighborhood award, the Comanche would have won it every single year. These weren't feared warriors or skilled farmers. They were outcasts surviving on scraps. The good territories belonged to stronger tribes. The Comanche got whatever nobody else wanted, which wasn't much. Everything changed in 1680 during the Pueblo Revolt. Thousands of Spanish horses suddenly ran free across the Southwest. The Spanish had accidentally created the biggest horse giveaway in history. Most tribes grabbed a few horses and went home happy. The Comanche saw something completely different. They saw their escape route from poverty. While other tribes treated horses like luxury items, the Comanche made them essential to everything. They didn't just ride horses, they lived with them, bred them, and understood them better than anyone else. The Comanche became obsessed with perfecting horsemanship. They could hang off the side of a galloping horse while shooting arrows with deadly accuracy. They could reload weapons while moving at full speed. They turned riding into a superpower that made everyone else look like beginners on ponies. Their new mobility changed everything about plains warfare. Comanche war parties could travel 400 miles for raids or hunting. They could appear anywhere, strike hard, and disappear before enemies could organize responses. The fully nomadic lifestyle set them apart from everyone else. While the Apache remained tied to their farms and permanent villages, the Comanche could pack up their entire civilization and move it in hours. They followed buffalo herds year-round, never missing the best hunting seasons. Within decades, the Comanche had gone from outcasts to the most feared warriors on the plains. Their horse-based culture gave them advantages no other tribe could match. Now, they were ready to use those advantages against their former oppressors. The Apache were about to learn what happened when the underdogs got good at fighting. The Comanche didn't just attack, they created nightmares. Their favorite tactic was the night raid during the full moon. They even gave it a name that still terrifies people: Comanche Moon. When that full moon rose, Apache villages knew exactly what kind of midnight delivery service was coming. These weren't quick battles. The Comanche perfected psychological warfare through extreme violence. They burned entire villages, tortured captives, and took women and children for the plains slave trade. The message was simple: surrender or suffer horribly. Their mounted archery skills were legendary. Comanche warriors could hang off their horses while shooting arrows with perfect accuracy. They could reload while moving at full gallop, then fire again before enemies could react. They'd turned horseback riding into the world's deadliest circus act. The Apache faced a terrible disadvantage. Their farming lifestyle meant they had to stay in one place to tend crops. Their villages were permanent targets that couldn't move or hide. The Comanche could scout Apache settlements, plan attacks, and strike when defenses were weakest. Apache communities became sitting ducks. It's hard to grow a successful corn crop when your neighbors specialize in burning down agricultural projects. The Apache had to choose between abandoning their farming lifestyle or watching their people get slaughtered. Traditional Apache warfare relied on foot soldiers and defensive positions. Against mounted Comanche warriors, these tactics were useless. Foot soldiers couldn't catch horse-mounted enemies who could strike and retreat at will. By the 1720s, the results were devastating. Entire Apache bands had been wiped out or forced to flee the plains. The Comanche war machine seemed unstoppable. Only a few Apache groups managed to continue resisting. Villages that had stood for generations were abandoned overnight. Apache families packed whatever they could carry and fled toward the mountains. The Comanche had basically evicted an entire civilization. The Apache weren't ready to give up completely. They had one desperate plan that might save them from total destruction, but it required doing something that would have been unthinkable just decades earlier. 1749 marked the Apache's most desperate gamble. They approached their old Spanish enemies with an incredible proposal: build us a mission and fort, and we'll convert to Christianity and stop raiding your settlements. When you're getting destroyed by the Comanche, even your former victims start looking like potential best friends. The Spanish saw an opportunity. They could gain new converts and create a buffer against Comanche attacks. It seemed like everyone would benefit from this arrangement. The Spanish built Mission San Sabah in 1757, but they made a critical error. They built it in Comanche territory, not Apache land. It was like building a house in someone else's backyard and then acting shocked when they complained about the property invasion. The Comanche viewed this as a direct challenge. Spanish soldiers and Apache refugees were setting up shop in the heart of Comanche hunting grounds. March 1758 brought the Comanche response. Around 2,000 Comanche warriors and their allies surrounded Mission San Sabah. The attack was swift and brutal. The Comanche killed 8 to 10 people and burned the mission buildings completely. They made their point perfectly clear. No Spanish settlements would be tolerated in Comanche territory. The Spanish tried to respond with military force. They organized a punitive expedition to teach the Comanche about European authority. Big mistake. The Comanche gave them a crash course in plains warfare instead. The Comanche destroyed the Spanish force so thoroughly that survivors barely made it home. The San Sabah massacre ended Apache hopes for Spanish protection. Their desperate alliance had failed spectacularly. The Spanish couldn't even protect themselves, let alone their new Apache roommates. The Comanche had proven their military dominance beyond any doubt. They destroyed a fortified Spanish position, defeated a European army, and sent a message that echoed across the plains. This is our land, and we'll defend it against anyone. The Apache faced a horrible reality. Their strongest potential ally had just been embarrassed by their worst enemy. There was nowhere left to turn for help, and their situation was about to get even worse. The Spanish learned a hard lesson from San Sabah. You can't beat the Comanche, so you better join them. Sometimes the smart move is switching sides before you get completely destroyed by your own stubbornness. By 1785, Spanish colonial policy had completely reversed. The new Spanish strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of fighting the Comanche, they'd make them allies. The peace and trade agreements gave the Comanche what they wanted: recognition of their territorial claims and access to European goods. But the deal came with a price. The Comanche had to help the Spanish destroy the Apache. It was the ultimate betrayal. Former enemies teaming up like the worst kind of neighborhood bullies against their mutual problem. 1790 brought the final blow. A joint Spanish-Comanche force tracked down hundreds of Lipan Apache warriors near San Antonio. The Apache were completely surrounded, outnumbered, and outgunned. The battle was a massacre. Hundreds of Apache warriors died in a single engagement. The survivors scattered, their military power broken forever. The Comanche had just erased the Apache from Plains history with European help and a very effective partnership. This wasn't just another battle, it was the end of Apache resistance on the Plains. The survivors abandoned their traditional homelands and retreated into the mountains. The Comanche had achieved total victory. They'd eliminated their greatest rival, secured Spanish recognition of their authority, and gained access to European trade goods. The transformation was complete. The southern plains, once dominated by the Apache, now belongs entirely to the Comanche. They'd built an empire through superior mobility, devastating tactics, and smart alliance building. The Apache dream of plains dominance was over. Their farming communities were gone, their warriors were dead or scattered, and their traditional enemies had formed an alliance against them. But the Apache weren't completely finished. They had one last card to play. Though it meant abandoning everything they'd built on the plains, the mountains became the Apache's final refuge. The harsh terrain that had once seemed like a disadvantage now offered their only hope for survival. Mountain living was brutal, no rich hunting grounds, no fertile farming areas, just rocks, cliffs, and dangerous weather. But it had one crucial advantage. Horses were nearly useless in the rugged highlands. The Comanche's greatest weapon suddenly became about as useful as a boat in a rock climbing competition. The Apache adapted to their new environment with typical determination. They used guerrilla tactics, striking from hidden positions and disappearing into rocky canyons. They'd gone from plains farmers to mountain ninjas in less than a generation. Small Apache bands continued fighting back, launching raids against both Comanche and Spanish settlements. They defended their mountain homelands with desperate courage. The Comanche, now masters of the plains, rarely pursued Apache bands deep into the mountains. They focused on controlling the vast grasslands that had made them powerful. Apache resistance continued for decades, but it was the resistance of survivors, not conquerors. They'd saved their culture and their people, but their dreams of plains dominance were buried with their warriors. The Great Apache-Comanche War had ended not with a final battle, but with a geographic separation. The plains belonged to the Comanche, while the Apache held on to their mountain strongholds. It was like the world's most violent divorce settlement. One side got the mansion, the other got the garage in the mountains. The Apache-Comanche War reshaped the entire Southwest. It created new tribal boundaries, destroyed old alliances, and established the Comanche as the dominant power on the southern plains. The Apache Mountain Exile would shape their culture for generations. They'd learn to survive in the harshest conditions, developing skills that would serve them well in future conflicts.